So we got this beautiful 1971 Chevy Chevelle in here. What the goal today is, so we gotta swap out the suspension. So on the front of here is pretty much factory suspension and coil springs. So we're gonna swap those out for coilovers and UMI upper and lower control arms, and new idler arm, new center link, new inner and outer tie rod ends, and Hotchkiss adjustment sleeves. So let's give a look under the hood. We built this car in 2018, I believe it was. And it's got a Gen 5 LT1 here in it, out of a 2016 Corvette. Just pretty basic setup, pretty basic swap. It looks pretty clean here. It's just a really nice car. So on the interior of here, we have our standard, Dakota Digital HDX in here. This car has all the modern technology you would see. HDX. We got push button start. We have a reverse camera. Bluetooth sound, everything. We got turn signal mirrors. See that? Just a really nice car. Overall basic setup. And then one of the most baller hits to this setup is even got a remote start. So let me see. I think it'll work with the hood up. Let's see here. No, it's not gonna work with the hood up. Really nice setup here. So HDX is fully wired. We got a fully changed. So let me. So we got that. I mean, it's a really nice setup. That's our nighttime view. This is our daytime, nighttime. The reason why it wasn't working before is because, like, when the lights flash too quickly like that, the Dakota Digital disables the the dim display, because it thinks something is wrong because it's seeing a constant change. So all of that's all wrapped up. So now we're gonna get the car up in the air, and then we will get started on removing the old suspension and putting the new suspension on. So let's do that. So we have our wheels off, and I just wanted to show you what the current stock suspension looks like. So you see we got a factory upper control arm, a factory lower control arm. This car does have aftermarket brakes on it. This is a CPP setup where it takes a Corvette style dual piston caliper, a 13-inch Corvette style rotor, and to mount that, they make their own spindle where you get the spindle, which is this right here, the spindle. It uses a sealed wheel bearing, like a wheel hub, and then you bolt your factory steering arm to it. So there's right there. That's the factory steering arm. This is the CPP spindle, and this is just like a Corvette style wheel bearing. But when you buy the kit, It comes with the spindle and the wheel bearing, the brake caliper, and the brake rotor. The only thing you have to do is reuse your steering arm. This is a factory style steering arm. So that's where we're at now. So like I say, we are going to replace the upper control arm, the lower control arm with UMI components, as well as put all new factory style inner and outer tie rod ends, UMI tie rod sleeves. These here are your tie rod sleeves, the UMI tie rod sleeves. Then I'll go and pull out the upper and lower control arms here in just a couple minutes. So here we go. So here go our new components for our 71 Chevelle there. The owner requested, he said, put as much red as possible underneath here. So that's what we're doing. So we're doing UMI upper control arms, UMI lower control arms, UMI sway bar, QA1 coilovers. This is the part number for the coilovers. Let me try to. This is for the front coilovers. We have all new front steering components. The idler arm isn't in the picture, but we do. These here, this is the part number for our tie rod end adjusters. I really like these, the machined to billet aluminums. That's a UAM part number. And in my opinion, this is a must when you put QA1 coilovers on. This is the thrust bearing. This makes changing ride height adjustments a lot easier. It's got that little thrust bearing in there. So I recommend you buy that. That is something that you have to purchase separately when you do purchase QA1 coilovers. So this is what the new stuff looks like. And we'll show you what some of the old looks like here again. So we have our coil spring out. This is our old lower control arm. This is our old upper control arm. So we'll start continuing to remove this stuff. You see, we already had an aftermarket sway bar on here. I think I'm not sure. This might have been a Hotchkiss one. I'm not sure. But yeah, so we're going to continue to remove all of this stuff and make room for the new. Okay, so one thing I want to point out is that this car has a Gen 5 LT1 in it. We originally did this swap in 2018. And as far as I know, in that time, this is the only Gen 5 swap car here in Michigan, aside from ones that were owned by GM. I mean, this car, I think I fired it up in 17 and it was running and driving in 18. It's got a 2016 Corvette Gen 5 wet sump LT1. And you can see we reused like the header from a Camaro and made like an exhaust manifold for it. We didn't make headers for this car. It was just a combination that we made and it works out real good. But one other benefit you have of switching to tubular control arms, I want you to look at the size of this right here and compare it to the size of this right here. This is the factory control arm. So the reason why we had to bang in that manifold so hard over here was because we needed that steering rod and control arm clearance. You also see during the removal, we had to take that rear bolt out so we could get the bolt out and then we could push the control arm in forward on there and then lift it straight out. We also had to loosen up our steering gearbox. Our steering shaft is off just to get the upper control arm out. And that's because this thing here is so massive compared to our tubular control arm. This is a whole lot stronger. It's lighter and it takes up less mass. So that's another one of the benefits you get from having tubular upper and lower control arms is that you take up a lot less room. So it gives you a lot more header and steering shaft clearance. So we're gonna get this control arm mounted on and keep moving. I just wanted to touch base on that for you. So we have our upper UMI control arms installed, our lower UMI control arms installed, our QA1 coilover adjustable shocks. So you can see, let me zoom in a little bit. So this is our adjustment knob. We will start out with this all the way on 0. Then we will set our ride height after the car is aligned. And then while it's on the alignment rack, we will torque our lower control arm bolts to spec. And then once the alignment is set, we will take it out for a drive and then adjust our QA1 single adjustable shock. This is how you get your ride height movement, your ride height adjustment right here, by adjusting this collar. And we have a thrust bearing in there. So we turn this up to raise the ride height. We lower it to lower the ride height. And then once your ride height is where you want it at, you lock this lower collar down here to keep the upper one from spinning. So the next thing we have to install is our spindle. So our spindle is down here. So we just put our spindle on, we torque it down, and then we can put our brake caliper back on, then we can put our brake rotor back on, then our brake caliper, torque all that down, and then move on to our new front suspension. Because we have a new idler arm, a new center link, and new tie rods, inner and outer tie rods, with a new adjustment sleeve. So that's what we're going to next. This is just a farther back view of how everything looks. UMI tubular upper and lower control arms, QA1 adjustable, single adjustable coilovers. So let's keep moving. Okay, so right now we have our suspension back fully assembled. Couple things. Because we have coilovers, we have to set the ride height. So before we put our steering components, our new steering components on, we will bolt our wheels back down and then set the car on the ground and then set the ride height. And then we can go back through and put our steering components on, and then we will double check our ride height. I don't think it'll change after we get our steering components on, but we just want to double check it. We want to run it through and make sure nothing is rubbing. But I prefer to set the ride height at first before we have the steering components back on, just because it's a little bit easier to make adjustments without a lot of things in the way. So if we have to make a fine adjustment where we notice once we're turning it's hitting something, we can make that adjustment, but we won't have to go as far as we would if we had to adjust it, say, an inch or two. Another thing I want to touch on, we can zoom in. So these UMI control arms take a tall ball joint, and you can see this gap right here. This is normal. The taller ball joints will not sit fully in your factory spindles or an aftermarket spindle that is designed for a factory style ball joint. They sit a little bit higher. So if you if you purchase the UMI control arms with the taller ball joint and it's not sitting fully in there, do not be worried about it. Just torque it to factory spec and grease everything, and you will be fine. So now we're gonna put the other side back together and then let it down and set our ride height. And then once our ride height is set, we will put cotter pins and everything, torque down our upper and lower ball joints, and then move on to our new front suspension. So that's where we're at. So we got these beautiful RUCCIs back on. So now we're gonna sit the car on the ground so we can check the ride height. Thing I forgot to install and I put in is our bump stop. So your bump stop goes in there. It goes in between the frame and the upper control arm to keep it from bottoming out. So we got that installed on both sides there. So that's in place. So we're gonna continue on with our suspension, with our steering. And then once we get all of our steering on, we will take it to the alignment rack, set our final ride height, and we also have to put our sway bar on too. This is our sway bar right here. So I'll check back in after we get our sway bar on before we go to the alignment rack. So we have our sway bar is now installed, and they take these spherical links. So this here's the bushing. This nut right here will jam up on that to keep it locked, and this will jam the bolt as it goes into the spherical end. And I will set all of that up once the car is on the alignment rack. We will torque our control arm bolts. We will set our sway bar, torque down our coilovers because we'll be certain where our ride height is. Then we will grease everything and then do the alignment. So I'll check back in after we get the car on the alignment rack and do all of that. So hold on. So we have all our suspension on. We got the new idler arm, center link, inner and outer tie rod ends, adjustment sleeve, upper and lower control arms, new sway bar links, sway bar. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna put it on the alignment rack and align it, and then final set our ride height. So you can see we still have our adjusters loose here because we're gonna do that once we get it set down and off all four wheels on the alignment rack. So this is what it looks like when everything is all together. All nice and red and black. So the holdup we had with the blue Chevelle as to getting the suspension done was that they sent us the wrong sway bar. It was in the correct box, but the wrong part was in the box. I tried to install it, it had a bunch of fitment issues, so I finally checked UMI website and got a measurement because I know this thing should work because I've used this exact same sway bar on this exact same setup before, and everything works and clears. So according to their website, it's supposed to be like 46, let me double check, 46, supposed to be 46.5 inches long from eyelet to eyelet. So if we go the eyelet right here and we come down right here, you see we're right at about 46.5. I may not have that tape measure exactly in the center there, but you will see this is actually the right one. So now let's go over to our incorrect one. And then we'll measure this one out. So this black one is the original one that was on the car. This red one is the one that came from UMI that was packaged wrong. So let's go here. So we'll go eyelet to eyelet there. We'll hit the center there and we'll come center here. So we're at 43. So we're at about 43 and some change here, almost 44. The whole sway bar itself is barely 46 inches wide. So that's why it was hidden there, because it's too narrow. So we already aligned the car. I didn't really show the alignment because I was having a little bit of frustration with the sway bar. So we'll get it back up in the air, get the sway bar mounted, and get the sway bar set and get this thing out of here. So we have the correct sway bar installed. Our end links are on there. That's what mounts the sway bar. Takes a bushing up top, then a spherical rod in at the bottom. We got that done on both sides. All our bump stops in. Our ride height is set. Our adjusters are locked down. So what we're gonna do, we have also torqued all of our control arms. The lower control arms were torqued with everything on the vehicle ride height. We went back through and torqued everything else. We're gonna take it for a quick drive, and then as long as everything is good, we will be done. So recap, what we did was we took factory control arms off, replaced with UMI upper and lower control arms, QA1 single adjustable coilovers. We have all new steering suspension components. We have UMI tie rod adjuster sleeves, a UMI sway bar, and we did a custom wheel alignment with the UMI specs. So that is everything. She is done. Now let's take it for a drive.